Daniel Harrow was an ordinary man. He lived in a small, quiet town. He had a wife he loved. He worked a job he didn't hate. His life was simple. It was predictable. But Daniel had a secret, a very dark secret. It was a secret that lived inside his sleep. When the sun went down and the world grew quiet, something else woke up inside him. Daniel claimed he killed people in his dreams. But these were not just dreams. The people he dreamed of killing were real, and they were turning up dead. This was his life, a constant battle between the man he was when he was awake and the monster he became when he was asleep. He lived in a state of perpetual fear. Every morning was a ritual of dread. He would wake up, his heart pounding in his chest. He would check his hands first. Were they clean? Was there dirt under his fingernails? Then he would turn on the television, his breath held tight. He would listen to the local news. He would scan the headlines online. He was always searching for a name, a face, a story about a person who had died in the night. He was looking for proof that his nightmare had once again bled into reality, a terrifying confirmation that he was not just a dreamer, but a killer hiding in plain sight. This condition did not have a simple name at first. It was just a darkness, a haunting. He would try to stay awake for days. He drank endless cups of coffee. He splashed cold water on his face. He walked around his house at 3 a.m., trying to outrun the exhaustion that pulled at his eyelids. But sleep always won. It was a relentless hunter, and when it caught him, it dragged him down into a world of shadow and violence. He described it as being a passenger in his own body, watching through his own eyes as he did terrible things, unable to scream, unable to stop, a helpless ghost in his own skin. His wife, Clara, saw the change in him. She saw the fear in his eyes. She saw the exhaustion etched onto his face. He looked like a man haunted by a ghost she could not see. He tried to explain it to her once. He told her about the dreams. He told her about the people. She held his hand and told him they were just nightmares. Stress, she said. But Daniel knew it was more than that. The details were too real. The faces were too clear. The terror he felt upon waking was too profound. It was a cold, hard certainty that settled in his bones. He was a monster, and he was sleeping right next to her. The first incident was subtle. It was almost forgettable. Daniel and Clara had a small argument one evening. It was about money, a common disagreement. They went to bed angry. Daniel fell into a deep, troubled sleep. He dreamed he was standing over Clara. His hands were around her neck. He was squeezing. He woke up with a gasp. He was drenched in sweat. Clara was sleeping peacefully beside him, but when she woke the next morning, there were faint, reddish marks on her neck. They looked like fingerprints. She laughed it off. She said she must have scratched herself in her sleep. Daniel said nothing. He just stared at his own hands, a cold dread washing over him. He tried to convince himself it was a coincidence. He had to believe it was. He spent the day in a fog, replaying the dream and staring at the marks on Clara's neck whenever she wasn't looking. He felt a growing sense of panic. Was he losing his mind? Were his dreams becoming so powerful that they could manifest physical signs? He wanted to tell her everything, to confess the violent thoughts that plagued his sleep, but the words caught in his throat. How could he explain something he did not understand himself? How could he tell the woman he loved that a part of him wanted to hurt her while he slept? The fear of what she might think, or worse, what she might do, kept him silent. The incident planted a seed of terror in Daniel's mind. It was a seed that grew with each passing night. He started sleeping on the couch. He told Clara he was restless. He said he didn't want to disturb her. The truth was he was terrified of being near her while he slept. He was afraid of what his sleeping self might do. He would lie awake on the sofa, listening to the house settle around him. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep. Every shadow seemed to move. He was a prisoner in his own home, guarded by his own mind. He was trying to protect his wife from a monster, and that monster was him. Clara became worried. She saw the distance growing between them. She thought he was pulling away from her. She thought their marriage was in trouble. She tried to talk to him. She asked him what was wrong. Daniel couldn't bring himself to tell her the whole truth. He just said he was stressed. He said it was work. He lied because the truth was too monstrous to speak aloud. He was living a double life. By day, he was a loving husband. By night, he was a potential threat. And the wall between those two lives was beginning to crumble, brick by terrifying brick. A few months later, Daniel went on a fishing trip with his friend, Mark. They went to a remote lake. It was meant to be a relaxing weekend, a chance to escape. For Daniel, it was a chance to be away from Clara, to ensure her safety for a few nights. They spent the day on the water, talking and fishing, but that night the nightmares returned with a vengeance. Daniel dreamed he was in a small boat. There was another man with him, an old fisherman he had seen earlier at the docks. In the dream, they argued. The argument became a fight. Daniel dreamed he pushed the old man into the dark, cold water and watched him sink. He woke up shouting. Mark was shaking him, his face filled with concern. Daniel was in his sleeping bag, inside their tent. It was just a dream. He repeated those words to himself over and over. It was just a dream, but his clothes were damp, and there was mud on his boots, which were placed neatly by the tent's entrance. He couldn't remember getting up. He couldn't remember walking outside. He felt a familiar, chilling sense of dread. He tried to act normal for Mark's sake. He laughed it off as a bad dream, but his heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. The next morning, as they were packing up, they heard the news on the car radio. A local fisherman was missing, an elderly man. He had gone out on his boat the previous evening and had not returned. His empty boat was found adrift on the lake. Daniel felt the world tilt on its axis. The air left his lungs. He looked at Mark, trying to keep his expression neutral, but inside he was screaming. It was him. It had to be him. The dream was not a dream, it was a memory of something his body did while his conscious mind was asleep, lost in a nightmare. The drive home was silent. Mark tried to make conversation, but Daniel could only give short one-word answers. His mind was racing, replaying the dream, the argument, the push, the splash. He could almost feel the cold water on his hands. He could see the old man's face filled with shock and fear. When he got home, he went straight to the shower. He scrubbed his skin until it was raw, as if he could wash away the memory, wash away the guilt. But it was no use. The stain was not on his skin, it was on his soul. He was a killer, and he couldn't even remember doing it. The final night was the one that broke everything. It was the night the shadows finally consumed the light. Daniel and Clara were trying to fix their relationship. They had a quiet dinner at home. They talked. They laughed. It felt almost normal. For a few hours, Daniel allowed himself to hope. Maybe the nightmares were gone. Maybe the darkness had passed. They went to bed together for the first time in weeks. Clara held his hand as they fell asleep. Daniel prayed for a dreamless night. He prayed for peace, but his prayers were not answered. The nightmare that came was the worst one yet. He dreamed of a struggle, a desperate, violent struggle in their own bedroom. He dreamed of Clara. She was fighting him, she was screaming, but in the dream her screams had no sound. It was a silent, terrifying ballet of violence. He saw his own hands, a stranger's hands, moving with a purpose he could not comprehend. He felt a terrible, sickening finality. Then the dream dissolved into blackness. He woke up to the sound of sirens. Red and blue lights were flashing through the window, painting the walls in frantic colors. He was on the floor, his head aching, and his wife Clara was lying on the bed. She was not moving. The police found him like that. He was dazed and confused. He was covered in blood. It was Clara's blood. He tried to explain. He told them about his dreams. He told them he didn't mean to do it. He said he was asleep. They looked at him with a mixture of pity and disbelief. To them, he was just another husband who had snapped, another domestic dispute that had ended in tragedy. They put him in handcuffs. As they led him out of the house, he saw his neighbors watching, their faces pale in the flashing lights. He was no longer Daniel Harrow, the quiet neighbor. He was a monster. He was taken to the police station. He sat in a cold, sterile interrogation room. He told his story again and again. He told them about the night with Clara and the marks on her neck. He told them about the fisherman. He told them about his fear of sleep. He begged them to believe him. He knew how it sounded. It sounded insane. It sounded like a desperate lie from a guilty man, but it was the only truth he had. He was trapped in a nightmare from which he could not wake up, and this time the consequences were real, irreversible, and utterly devastating. The life he knew was over, destroyed by his own hands while he slept. The case of Daniel Harrow was strange. It was unlike anything the local police had ever seen. His story was consistent. It was detailed, and it was utterly bizarre. His public defender, a young, overworked lawyer, was at a loss. How do you defend a man who confesses to the crime but claims he was asleep when he did it? The story caught the attention of the media. It was a sensational tale. The sleeping killer, they called him. The name stuck. And it was this notoriety that brought his case to the attention of Dr. Julian Cross, a renowned neurologist and sleep specialist. He was fascinated by the extremes of the human mind. Dr. Cross was not your typical scientist. He was drawn to the fringes of medicine, to the cases that other doctors dismissed as impossible. He had spent his career studying rare sleep disorders, from people who could not sleep at all to those who lived out their dreams in vivid physical detail. When he read about Daniel Harrow, he saw not a monster but a medical mystery. He saw a man whose brain might hold the key to understanding the deep, dark connection between the sleeping mind and the waking world. He contacted Daniel's lawyer and offered his expertise free of charge. He had to know what was happening inside Daniel's head. The first meeting between Daniel and Dr. Cross took place in a stark, grey room at the county jail. Daniel was gaunt and hollow-eyed. He looked like a man who hadn't truly slept in months. He was, skeptical of the doctor. He had told his story so many times to so many people who didn't believe him. But Dr. Cross listened differently. He didn't interrupt. He didn't judge. He just listened with a quiet, intense focus. He asked questions that no one else had asked, not about the crime, but about the dreams. What did they feel like? What did he see? Did he feel like himself? Dr. Cross explained his theory to Daniel. He spoke of a rare condition, a severe form of REM sleep behavior disorder, or RBD. In a normal person, the body is paralyzed during the dream stage of sleep. This is called muscle atonia. It's nature's way of keeping you from acting out your dreams. But in some people, this paralysis fails. The switch doesn't flip. The body is free to move, to run, to fight, to act out whatever the dreaming mind can conjure. Dr. Cross suspected that Daniel had the most extreme case of this disorder he had ever encountered. It was a hypothesis, but it was the first glimmer of hope Daniel had felt in a very long time. To test his theory, Dr. Cross needed to study me while I slept. This was honestly not an easy task. It required special permission from the court and a secure facility. Eventually, a sleep lab was set up in a guarded wing of a local hospital. I was moved there under heavy security. The room was filled with cameras and sensors. Wires were attached to my head to monitor my brain waves, and sensors were placed on my body to track my movements. For the first time, I was going to sleep with an audience. I was terrified of what they might see, but I was also desperate for an answer. The first few nights were inconclusive. I was just too anxious to fall into a deep sleep. I'd doze off, only to jolt awake moments later. Dr. Cross was patient. He knew the environment was stressful. He spoke with me each day, reassuring me, explaining the process. He created a calm and predictable routine. Finally, on the fourth night, it happened. I fell into a deep REM sleep. The monitors in the observation room lit up. My brain was showing the classic signs of dreaming, but the sensors on my body showed something else. The paralysis, the muscle atonia, was completely absent. The team in the observation room watched in stunned silence. I began to move. I was still asleep, my eyes closed and fluttering, but my body was active. I sat up in bed. I mumbled words that were unclear. I seemed to be having an argument with someone who wasn't there. Then my movements became more violent. I threw a punch into the air. I kicked my legs. I was living out a fight in my dream. The monitors confirmed it. My brain activity was that of a person deep in a dream, but my body was a puppet to the nightmare, acting out the script my sleeping mind was writing. Dr. Cross had his proof. He had recorded it on video. He had the data from the brain scans and the muscle sensors. It was undeniable. I was not faking. I was not lying. I was suffering from a profound neurological disorder. My brain's safety switch was broken. When I dreamed of violence, my body was capable of carrying it out without my conscious mind being aware or in control. Dr. Cross now had the monumental task of explaining this complex and terrifying reality to a judge and a jury, to a world that saw things in simple terms of good and evil, awake and asleep. The trial of Daniel Harrow became a media sensation. It was not just about one man's guilt or innocence, it was about the very nature of responsibility. Can you be held accountable for actions you committed while you were unconscious? The courtroom was packed every day. Journalists, legal experts, and curious members of the public filled the benches. I sat at the defense table, looking small and broken. I listened as the prosecution painted me as a violent man who had brutally murdered his wife and was now trying to escape justice with an outlandish, unbelievable story. They presented the evidence, the blood, the struggle. It was a powerful and simple narrative. Then the defense began its case. Their star witness was Dr. Julian Cross. He took the stand, and for 2 days he explained the science of sleep. He used charts and diagrams. He spoke in clear, simple language. He described the function of the brainstem in paralyzing the body during REM sleep. He explained what happens when that function fails. He presented the videos from the sleep lab. The courtroom watched in hushed awe as the video showed me fast asleep, acting out a violent struggle with an invisible foe. It was chilling. It was compelling. It was something no one in that room had ever seen before. The prosecutor was relentless in his cross-examination. He accused Dr. Cross of being a junk scientist. He suggested that I could have been faking my symptoms in the sleep lab. He argued that even if the condition was real, it didn't excuse murder. He asked the jury a simple question. If a drunk driver kills someone, do we excuse them because their judgment was impaired? No. Daniel Harrow may have a condition, but he is still responsible for his actions. The argument was powerful. It appealed to common sense. It was easier to believe in a bad man than in a broken brain. The trial became a battle of narratives. The prosecution's story was about choice and evil. The defense's story was about biology and malfunction. My entire life was laid bare for the court to see. My friends and family testified about the changes they saw in me, my growing fear and exhaustion. The prosecution brought up the fisherman's death, painting a picture of a pattern of violence. The defense argued that this was further proof of the condition's progression. The jury was caught in the middle, forced to decide where the man ended and the disease began. The weight of the decision was palpable in the tense, silent courtroom. The jury deliberated for 4 long days. For me, it was an eternity. I sat in a holding cell, unable to sleep, waiting for 12 strangers to decide my fate. I thought about Clara. I thought about the life we had lost. I felt a profound sense of guilt, but it was a strange, disconnected guilt. I knew my body had killed her, but my mind, my conscious self, was innocent. How could I reconcile those two truths? No matter the verdict, I knew I would be imprisoned for the rest of my life, either in a jail cell or in the prison of my own mind, forever terrified of falling asleep. Finally, the jury reached a decision. The courtroom was silent as the foreman stood to read the verdict. I held my breath. I looked at the jury, trying to read their faces, but they were unreadable masks. The foreman cleared his throat. On the charge of murder in the first degree, we, the jury, find the defendant. He paused, the silence stretched, thin and tight. Not guilty by reason of automatism. A gasp echoed through the courtroom. I slumped forward, tears streaming down my face. It was not a cry of joy, but of overwhelming relief and sorrow. They believed me. They actually believed me. The verdict was a landmark decision. Automatism, the legal defense of acting unconsciously, had rarely been used successfully in a case this serious. The judge ruled that I could not be sent to prison, as I lacked the criminal intent, and the required for a murder conviction. However, I could not be set free. I was clearly a danger to the public and to myself. The judge ordered me to be committed to a secure psychiatric and neurological facility. I would live there for the rest of my life under constant medical supervision and care. It was a life sentence, but not in a prison. The decision was controversial. Clara's family was devastated. They saw it as a failure of justice. How could a man who killed their daughter not be a murderer? Legal experts debated the precedent it set. Was this a new loophole for criminals to exploit? Or was it a sign of the law finally catching up with the complexities of neuroscience? The case of Daniel Harrow forced a difficult conversation about free will, consciousness, and culpability. It challenged the very foundations of how we define responsibility. For the legal and scientific worlds, the questions were just beginning. For me, one nightmare had ended, only for another to begin. I live my life in a room that is both a hospital and a prison. The windows are reinforced, the door is locked. Every night I am monitored as I sleep. The doctors continue to study me, hoping to understand my condition better, to find a treatment that might one day quiet the storms in my mind. I take medication that helps suppress the violent episodes, but they're not a cure. The nightmares still come. I still dream of a world of shadow and violence. But now, I'm in a place where I cannot harm anyone. I am safe from myself. I have, in a way, found a strange kind of peace in my confinement. My case changed the way the legal system looks at sleep disorders. It forced courts to consider the possibility that a person can be a weapon without a will. It opened the door for more nuanced defenses based on neurological evidence. Dr. Cross became a leading figure in the field of forensic neuroscience, often called to testify in cases where the line between the brain and the mind was blurred. The story of the sleeping killer became a staple in law schools and psychology textbooks, a cautionary tale about the mysteries that still lie dormant within the human brain, waiting for the right or wrong circumstances to awaken. Sometimes I get a new doctor or a new nurse. They come to me with a quiet curiosity. They have read my file. They have seen the videos. They look at me, this quiet, polite man, and they try to see the monster that lives inside me, but they can't, because the monster only comes out when I am gone, when I am lost in the world of dreams. I talk to them. I tell them my story. I want them to understand I am not evil. I am just broken. My brain has a flaw, a tiny short circuit in the complex wiring that separates our dreams from our reality. The mystery of Daniel Harrow is not truly solved. Yeah, we have a name for my condition. We have scientific data. But the deeper questions remain. Where does the self reside? If your body acts without your mind's permission, are those actions still yours? I live with this question every day. I will go to sleep tonight, as I do every night. I will close my eyes and drift away. And in the darkness, the other Daniel, the one from the nightmare, may wake up. I am the chilling proof that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we carry inside us, waiting for us to fall asleep.